Hello and welcome back to VGC. I'm Jordan Midler. Joining me today is GG Recon's Aaron Bain. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm good, Jordan. How are you?
I'm very well. Today we are talking about Dying Light 2 after 500 hours that we've both put in the past week.
Yep. Walk
we're
to
here-
Warsaw and back.
Yes, exactly. We're here to talk about the latest open world zombie game from Techland. Now, just from a starter point, Aaron, how did you find yourself getting on with the game? How long did you put into it? And yeah, what are your general kind of top line impressions? No spoilers for anyone watching.
Yeah, so I ended up spending about just over 30 hours with the game. I pretty much mainlined just the quest because I got the code a little bit later. So I didn't get a lot of time to go into a lot of the other open world content stuff. I tried a little bit of exploration and side content, but it's a weird kind of game. It's a large improvement in many aspects from the first game, which I was actually quite a big fan of. And then at the same time, this big, lofty, ambitious title that they said they were going to go for, you know, when they're talking about branching narrative that's going to completely change your map and your story and the characters and all that, it just didn't really live up to that at all to me. But it still had this really solid open world to explore and fun gameplay as well. That was kind of the main thing for me that kind of elevated it a bit in the end.
I feel kind of largely the same. I think that the gameplay is kind of two halves. I think the free running is actually pretty good, and especially when you start unlocking more moves, it's very fluid. It's like very Mirror's Edge-esque, even down to kind of the shoulder button based control. But I think that the combat really didn't work for me at all. It felt like every enemy had about twice as much health as it should have to be fun. Like it felt like I was constantly hacking away at enemies over and over. I also felt like, and I don't know if you felt the same, towards the end of the game, it might as well not have been a zombie game because I just didn't really interact with them whatsoever.
This was one of the things that I didn't get to bring up in my review. And it was something I was really thinking about towards the end of the game as well, is, you know, one of the biggest selling points, I suppose, of the first game was this whole day and night cycle. When it gets to night, you don't really want to be out there. It's where all the good loot is, but all the scary monsters are coming out and it's really difficult to survive. And I just didn't really feel that was the case. I remember in the last one going, oh, you know what, it's getting a bit late. I might sleep until the morning and then go out. And then in this one, I was just like, oh, it's night. Well, I suppose I get a little bit extra XP by wandering. But yeah, like the game itself says to you, stick to the rooftops because, you know, the streets are where the zombies are, and that's even more the case during the nighttime segments. And I just took that to heart, I suppose. I just stayed in the rooftops, and that meant that I was really not coming across a lot of zombies. And the focus was just the human enemies. The zombies were just, you know, spamming R2. I'm playing on console, but like spamming R2 just to take their health bars down, and that was it really.
It sets
So
up,
yeah, I would agree with that.
It sets it up at the start, especially in the kind of the tutorialized, the first time you're at night. It sets up that there's going to be these enemies that can attract large hordes to chase after you. There's like a chase meter where it's like 1 to 4 levels of how intense it'll be. But and apart from the kind of scripted sequence at the start where you're getting like quite a good chase, you're so highly maneuverable, especially when you start unlocking things like some of the kind of I don't actually know which traversal elements have been talked about or not yet, but there are basically, there's a point towards the kind of is quite near the start of the game, kind of in the middle, where you can essentially fly. Like you're so maneuverable that no zombie can come anywhere near you. So they don't ramp up the threat with how capable you are of getting away from it. So like the last kind of couple hours of the game, I was just going directly to the next mission, and sure, there was a couple of zombies in the street, especially when you're like if you're going down a crowded kind of hallway, but they also give you ways to deal with that. You have like a shoulder charge and just go straight through them. So it feels like a game that was really ambitious, as you said, but kind of lost sight of the fact that at one point it was a zombie game, you know.
Yeah, the like I didn't even have that bash through skill yet. I still don't at this point, and I had no problem at all with the zombies. You know, the what I can't remember what they're called, but there's the zombies that make the loud noise and attract the hordes. But they, howlers, they are just, if you're running past them quick enough, you're really not going to have to deal with them.
Yeah.
And that was the thing, like you're saying, like you get up, upgrade your parkour skills enough, you're going to be able to quickly find yourself on top of a building or jump. You can literally run through skyscrapers and jump out the other end now, or a lot of the buildings actually. So really, if there ever it was, I think I maybe only had like 1 or 2 chases that were unintentional, and even then, you just beeline it to the closest UV light, and I didn't really ever find that was like sweating the same way or kind of nervous the same way that you did get with the first game.
Yeah,
So that
I
was a bit of a
thought that the kind
disappointment.
of, especially compared to the first game, as you mentioned, the day-night cycle didn't feel like it mattered whatsoever. You didn't feel like you needed to be especially prepared for the nighttime. I actually think the entire kind of weapon system, it feels kind of irrelevant because one, I didn't find myself finding anything that was that interesting or fun to use. Like everything just seemed to be a variation of like a bit of metal, and then
Yeah.
all the kind of sub items like grenades and stuff like that. And it's like I don't really need these. The only time I'm ever actually fighting large enemies to the end of their health bar is when it's like dictated by the quest.
Yeah, and just fly kick them. That was like the only thing I'd done. Just fly kick or slide into them were like the 2 things I use for combat the most.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the weapons were a bit of a letdown. And no guns in this one.
Yeah.
I noticed, which was present towards the end of the last game, and not that you don't have the ability to repair your weapon, from what I've seen anyway.
Yeah,
So,
I can't find anything. There it might be the case where there's a lot of shops and like sub menus in this game, so there is a chance. But also, I didn't find myself attached to any one weapon apart from towards the end. I got like a gold weapon that was quite good, but the rest of them were just kind of whatever, and they just weren't that fun for like a zombie apocalypse game. Like, there's obviously this shares a lineage with the Dead Island games. Like they reference Dead Island within the first like 5 minutes of the game, and that game kind of traded in this idea of fun kind of environmental based weapons. And you think in a game that is set like a certain amount of time after the events of the first game, like they reference Haran and stuff like that, that there would be these kind of stranger, kind of more exciting weapons, but it's still just like a bit of pole.
Yeah, it's still just your typical kind of post-apocalyptic weaponry.
Yeah.
They're considering as well. I think that they clearly put so much effort into the world building for this. This was kind of like part of the reason I liked it as much as I did, was that compared to the first game's like there's a pandemic and we're locking down this city. But now for this one, it's kind of ended up being the saving grace of the city because it's had the walls to protect it. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on inside that still make it dangerous. But there was a lot of time and effort went into that made it feel quite real to me, and I enjoyed exploring it. But there was all these advancements in that regard. They're talking about different factions. There's different communities that are living together or having struggles, and then those elements like the weapons just haven't really went beyond, because the electrical modifications and fire and all that was available in the first game as well, if I remember right. So they haven't really advanced that much beyond what was there the first time, even though everything else seems to have kind of jumped ahead in terms of like the world around them.
There's kind of a, it's interesting you say that about like the world building and things like that. I think it's worth probably talking about the story at this point. I don't know how you got on with it, but I thought that the story started in a bad place with this melancholy trip through like an abandoned house where someone has an A4 printed glossy photo of them and their husband sitting next to their corpse. Like that's the level of environmental storytelling we're doing now. It's like there is a literal picture of the people that you are, and
just
then
this man's face.
Yeah, exactly. It is like the ultimate joke of like the environmental storytelling in Fallout 3 of like someone dying on the toilet. Oh, I wonder how that happened. Like it is that, but played serious. And then you go into these kind of like commune areas, and there's a few, like the first one you go into is the bazaar, which is kind of, it sets up kind of the politics of the world. And while some of that stuff is okay, I felt like I was just getting talked at and talked at and talked at and talked at. No wonder they said this game is 500 hours and there's like 250,000 lines of dialogue in it, because every single conversation goes on for about 3 times as long as it needs to.
Yeah, there were certain discussions, I think, with the optional dialogue that I actually did enjoy, in terms of, like, there was a few characters that I ended up kind of gravitating towards a little bit more, but then there was just that stereotypical rubbish that comes with open world games, because I remember being in the bazaar and there was a guy every time you walked in who had the most annoying voice in the world, who just kept saying, "Oh man, I can't believe that I've not been able to get this one vital bit for my experiment." And you're like, he says the same thing every time you're going in and in and in. And I just thought, I ended up doing it purely to stop so that I didn't have to listen to him anymore. And that is like, goes in the face of what I think this game was striving to be originally. Because since I've kind of went back and looked at some of the promotional material that released, and like the deep dives and gameplay, and, you know, they're talking about how much the story's going to impact what happens. You know, you can side with different factions, and very early on you're like, oh, I felt it was quite interesting, because you know, they had this whole investigation at the very beginning about a death of a leader of one faction, and I actually I quite liked that story to start. And I thought it was, you were kind of leaning up like who you thought would be better for your own goal, to advance your own goal, and then who you like better as well. But then as you go on, it just, the choices just didn't really seem to do anything. And then if that's like your biggest selling point of your story, that you're going to change stuff, but then all of your side content's the same stuff we've been playing for 10 years now, it's a very middling experience. And I will say though, the story was way better than the first game. Like I really, really despised the story of the first game, despite really liking the game, because I was going on about this with my colleagues today about how the very end, obviously the end of Dying Light 1, spoilers for that, I suppose, ends in a QTE. And the main guy then says at some point something like, "We're not so different, you and I." And I always think it is a pet peeve of mine. And I always think if you've written a word like that, you should be stripped of your credits. It's terrible, and it makes my skin crawl. And luckily there wasn't so much of that here. There was the occasional bit, you know, like you go up to a guard and he start telling you his life story. And you're like, "What? I've literally just met you for the first time." So there's a lot of that stereotypical open world stuff, but it does attempt some things in certain areas. But I'm wondering how much they've had to scale things back, despite it being such a large game. I think it's obvious that the branching narrative that they've got has been taken back considerably from what they have been suggesting from the promotional material, without going into spoilers.
No, I totally agree, and I'd be interested to see like a breakdown of exactly the kind of pain points of when things change and what the actual options are, or if it's like Greg Miller always described it as like a diamond, like everyone starts at the same place and then you can go off in whatever different direction, but you always end in the exact same place, so it's like kind of an illusion of choice.
And one of the biggest annoyances I had with it, especially, and that kind of makes me come to that conclusion that it's not as good as they'd wanted it to be, is that it doesn't really make it obvious how your choices have actually impacted the story. I felt like they needed like a little telltale warning in the sign, like, this guy's going to remember that. Or you decided this and now here are the ramifications for that. Because there wasn't a single moment where I was like, oh no, I've messed up. I shouldn't have done that, and now I'm having to pay for it. There was nothing like that. And you know, I've having discussions with people at GG Recon who have also been playing the game. It's trying to decipher like, okay, so you made this decision and I made that, so what actually changed? And it's really muddled, and it's quite difficult to see like how things actually changed narrative wise, because there seems to be big implications for the characters. So I think there's going to be a lot of like dissecting of how these things change what you're actually doing, and I have a feeling that it's just going to be you're doing the same thing but maybe with a different character. That was kind of the impression I got from it, which is massively disappointing, to be honest.
Because a lot of the time it feels like just after you make your big decision regarding this character, you don't interact with that character again going forward in the game, so it wouldn't have actually mattered whether or not, for example, they lived or died. So really, like what was the kind of point of this choice. Also, there's a choice in kind of the mid game that I made by mistake that should have really pissed off a certain character.
I think I know exactly what you're talking
about. To the point where they shouldn't have wanted to ever interact with me again, and then they're just right there at the next mission and come up with some like flimsy excuse to be like, oh, I still had to come and save you or whatever. And I was like, right, okay, like so it didn't actually matter, like that I kind of betrayed you and kind of just lied to you completely, or just like I whatever. I know you're like a famous actress, but I didn't think you had to force yourself to be in this game like quite so much.
Oh no, so I had actually, now that you've mentioned, well, kind of specified the character, I had a bit much earlier on that just was like exactly that kind of scenario. You're thinking, oh man, here we go, this is it, that, you know, the paths are diverging now, I've done something that's, you know, unforgivable, and no, it's not. It's you know, not even referenced. And that's what I'm saying. I kind of thought for the most part, oh, they're going for quite a nuanced approach. You know, it's blurry, the lines between right and wrong. You can go back and forth between these people. But no, it just doesn't seem like the game really has the complexity to deal with the consequences that, you know, like there was a thing where I was like, you would never speak to me again. You would actively probably try to take revenge on me. Yet here we are in a little secret meeting and you've not even mentioned it. Yeah. And that confused me. It took me out of the story as well, because the way that it sets up, you just think everything's going to be more serious. But yeah, that is kind of, it seems weird that they've tried to go for this, and that's kind of one of their big selling points of this game. Yet they just don't go for it. They just don't have enough of a forceful push into what you're actually doing, how you're changing this world. And I think that's going to be like the major thing that a lot of people buying this game are going to point out towards. I think people are going to go, oh, it's fun killing zombies. It's always going to be fun fly kicking a zombie off a roof. Yeah. It's, you know, it looks incredible. I don't know about you. Did you have any problem?
I actually don't think it looks very nice at all. I really, what mode did you play it on?
The performance one, I think.
Yeah, there's a 60 frames a second mode. There is a resolution mode, which I assume is 4K, and a quality mode, which it does the cardinal sin of giving you 3 options, but not actually describing in detail what they really do. So you just kind of have to infer. I thought the performance mode, it's solid, but I really, you can only play it in performance mode, because if you played the free running and the quality mode will make you sick. Like it feels so choppy. But I didn't think I thought it looked really dated. Like I thought the world looked really kind of washed out, and I thought the geometry looked kind of flat, and the kind of thing that because you're going past it at such speed, so it didn't really matter. But I'm surprised to hear you say that you thought it looks quite nice.
I really like the presentation of it. I think a lot of it's to do with, for one, color. It's way more colorful than the last game. And I'd say probably more that if it's not, well, it's not really a spoiler to say, but there's like a main city area and then an old town area. And the main city's been the one that has been in a lot of the advertisements, and it looks fantastic. I think the variety to rooftops and street level and buildings was really nice. And I think part of what I liked about the visual style was more maybe leaning towards more the level design itself.
Yeah.
Just because it did feel very varied, especially compared to the first game. But I liked all the little details, like maybe grass on the roof, or I don't even know, like
the hundreds of thousands of bin bags that are absolutely everywhere.
Bin so bags for days. But no, I still like. I think it kind of goes up and down. I have a feeling that there's certain elements that they put in more. I almost had a feeling they had more detail in some spaces that made it look really good, and then other places, you know, I've got quite a few screenshots now, and some of them you probably could put next to Dying Light 1 and go, that's kind of similar, and others I just think are just such a far departure. No, but I was pretty impressed with the visuals.
I think that it's kind of, if you swap between the modes, and you unpause it, you can see the world reload in the new mode. Like you can see all the shadows changing, you can see the geometry changing, you can see exactly what it affects. And I think on a monster PC, like on those nice settings with a solid frame rate, I think it would look fantastic. But I think the the things they do to compromise to make it feel smooth, which on balance is what you would want, but also like I have seen much better looking games run at 60 frames a second on the PlayStation 5. Like, it seems strange that we're still at a point where like we're kind of relegated to this kind of hamstrung settings. But you mentioned something there that I wanted to pick up on, the level design. I think it's really smart how in that second city area, basically wherever you are, you're about 2 seconds away from being able to get up to a really high point. Like, you just need to do a couple of moves on the ground and then you're up basically straight away.
Yeah, that's one of the, because I don't feel like I remember seeing a video they released pre-release that was saying that they doubled the parkour moves, and that wouldn't have said, had they not said that, I don't think I would have been like, oh, the parkour is way better. I think the level design's way better, and that's kind of what helps the parkour so much, because you're right, like you'll have these kind of slings that will bring you up, or vents that will shoot you up into the air, or really it's just vehicles lined up so you can jump from one to the next, and the next thing you're up on top of a building. And I loved the level design because it never made you feel like, never made you question where you were going or what you were doing. No matter what direction you turned in, there was probably an answer for you in the direction you wanted to go. And that, especially when you get up the higher, you rank up a wee bit and you get some more tools and skills, I think it was just so fun. And I was really, I mean, sometimes I'm easily impressed with these things, but literally just being able to run through a building was really, really cool to me, even though maybe it's just get loot or a couple of zombies, like there's nothing substantial in there. But having the option, instead of being shut off by like all of these closed doors, which in my review I compared to like Cyberpunk 2077, which is obviously like a vastly different open world, but it looks really nice, or it was supposed to look very nice. But you're just constantly coming up to all of these places that you can't interact with and you can't go through. And while we're not looking for vendors or anything here, obviously that's not going to be the case. But having just the ability to climb up like 30 stories in a skyscraper and find just this random bedroom that you can go in and pick some stuff up in, it really impacted my immersion in the game. For when every time that the story took me out of it, or the narrative choices took me out of it, those kind of explorative elements brought me back in.
They treat the kind of parkour and like free climbing elements as puzzles, and I think that works well. Like it has Ubisoft towers, but it gets around that by making each of those towers a bit of a parkour challenge, making them interesting, which is a good choice. I agree. The moments where there's a few missions where it's just like get to the top of this thing, and that's always where I was like, okay, this will be fun because it's not too handholdy. They do the thing where they teach you the language of everything that has a bit of yellow on it is probably going to be something like the direct kind of path. But later on, you get equipment that kind of completes your set of tools for like longer distances and longer jumps and stuff like that. And when all that stuff works together, I think it's great. I think it's a bit fiddly in the early game. I think you need to unlock a good few upgrades before you feel like you can actually move. Like, you can't slide at the start of the game. Like, there's some things that you just assume that you can do. But after you got there's one move that once you clamber over something and press L1, you like shoot forward. That really started getting me thinking about like the momentum and things like that. So I think all that element is really strong. It's just in a game that I found like deeply kind of uninspiring, and it doesn't feel like a sequel to the original Dying Light. Like, the thing that I remember from Dying Light, the dynamics of the zombies and how the tagline for that game was like good luck, good night, and good luck. Like, the night element is still there in theory, but it isn't capitalized upon like at all. I'll spend entire nights out doing missions and then not realize and just get a big bonus for it because I was there, but there's no danger really, especially when you're so fast and can essentially fly, and the difficulty of zombies at hour 1 doesn't really ramp up when you're at like hour 30 or whatever. Also, it's probably not worth paying too much lip service to, but I don't know where they got that 500 hours thing from, because like there is a lot of side quests, but come on, like I can't. This is not like a Red Dead story where you're spending like 70 hours to finish it. Like, you wrap it up in a fairly normal amount of time, and the world isn't that big.
Yeah, you know what I would say about the length in terms of story and kind of and side content? I think they do this sort of smart play where or well, I say smart, but as someone that was just trying to play through the campaign, it kind of annoyed me and it felt like there was a lot of loose ends. But essentially, you have, like you kind of mentioned it earlier, you have main characters that you're like, this is a big character, this is one of the main characters of this game, and then all of a sudden they're a side quest, and
Yeah.
you never need to see them again. This is another thing I mentioned in a review. I had two characters from the beginning of the game. One of them I saw in a side quest at one point. One of them I never saw again, and that is like might be smarter for people that just want to take their time with the game. Maybe they'll go, you know what, I'm actually quite curious to see what happened to this person, so I'll do the side quest here, and it gives you a wee bit more incentive in some regards to doing that. But it is like a lot of just stuff. You know, you've got bases, anomalies, I think they were called, towers to capture, like different kinds of towers to capture as well. You've got like metro stations. There's just like so much for you to do, and some of it does actually help you gameplay wise. But a lot of it is just like that.
It's like open world stuff. Like it's just it has you open the map and there are thousands of question marks. Like that's that you know what kind of game you're in. Like it's not for all the talk of it being revolutionary from like a story perspective, and there are elements like once you capture certain areas in the game, you'll be given an option to give it to one faction or the other, and which faction you give it to determines what like a small bonus you'll get in the city essentially. And while it could be argued that that does technically change the map, because there's one that's like, oh, you get crash pads everywhere now, as if that even mattered, because you very quickly get something that means that you'll never actually land hard on the ground ever again. That stuff is so minor that it just I didn't really feel like engaging with it too much. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a disappointment for me, to be honest. I actually misremembered that the first game was really well received. It only has like a 75 on Metacritic or something like that, but I really liked that first game, and for some reason I thought that it reviewed much better. But I think
I've got like 230 hours into that game. I really enjoyed that one.
But I think this is not quite what I was looking for. I don't know if it's an element of open world fatigue since then, or I just expected something a bit different. But it was a disappointment for me.
I think the problem is it tries to present itself as an elevated version of an open world game, but really it's just, you know, your bog standards with a lot of fancy tools on the side. So like I think they'll be able to sell it a little bit better than say like a Far Cry game. I think it is better in that regard. I did enjoy it more than Far Cry 6, and try to think of the last open world game, but honestly I can't. But I think it is a good open world game. It's just an open world game. It's not this groundbreaking progressive title for the zombie genre or anything like that. And like it's barely even a zombie game, as you were saying. Like it's just they're there and you can deal with them if you want, but you don't need to. You don't really need to bother.
Exactly. Well, Aaron, where can people find your review?
You can find my review over on GG Recon, which is the gaming and esports website. I will be tweeting it out. I will have tweeted it out by this point as well over on Twitter at WatchPlayType.
Worth noting, for those wondering, you'll be seeing video reviews and this video about 9 hours after the written embargo, because we're not allowed to post video of this game until it is out at
secret recording here.
Yeah, at midnight. So not curious why that is, but anyway, you'll see my review on VGC. Until we are back with another discussion about the next big game review, we will see you next time. From me, Jordan, it is goodbye. From Aidan,
goodbye.
See you later.